Are you ready? Let's go. Ready?
Ready.
Yeah, ready when you are.
Okay, you ready?
Yep.
Okay, you ready?
I'm ready.
Holden Shepherd, Heidi Anderson, Jan Latter, Alison Patterson, welcome to my little show.
Why do you call it a little chat show?
Jan Nichols, Sam Eichen, Annabelle Smith, Donna Mazza, Rebecca Watson, Jonelle Fraser, Tracy Jacobson, Adam Wallace, Monique Mulligan, Matt Glover, Karen Young. I don't even know where I'm going with this. Welcome to my show. Hey, welcome back to another episode of Josh Langley Gets to Know. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe to the YouTube channel so you get notifications straight to your inbox to say there's a new interview up. Now, here I am, my online course for kids to help build self-esteem and confidence it's just been really amazing. I'm actually getting a lot of interest from psychologists who are going, we are looking at, seeing if this course would be appropriate to recommend to our clients. And that's something I didn't expect and something that I'm finding very, very, I don't know, it's uplifting because it makes me feel what I'm doing is being of great value and actually touching people and connecting with people who I wouldn't have thought of and making a great difference. So that's really exciting. So let's get to meet our guest today, who is Georgia Richter. Now, if you are an author or you want to be an author or you're busy writing a book, you are going to be wanting to watch this interview with Georgia Richter because she is the editor of fiction, narrative, non-fiction and poetry at Fremantle Press. And she has co-authored this book with Deborah Hunn, which is How to Be an Author, the Business of Being a Writer in Australia. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant book. I've just finished talking to George about everything in here. We've just gone off on so many different tangents. But if you're a writer or if you're an author, you're going to get so much out of this interview. So sit back, pour a wine, coffee, whatever it is, whether you're walking, whether you're taking the dog for a swim. Maybe not a dog for a swim. Anyway, regardless, let's get to know Georgia Richter.
What are we gonna do with all this time?
Georgia Richter, how are you going?
I'm a box of birds, Josh Langley. How are you?
I love that. A box of birds. That's the best response to that I've had in all these interviews. I love it. Now, even better, you and Deborah Hunn have just released How to Be an Author, the Business of Being a Writer in Australia. I want to say thank you so much for putting this together and writing it. How does it feel to... Actually, I want to ask you, is it almost like you got sick of people asking you all these questions and you went, hey, Deborah, let's write a book just to stop all these questions?
It was kind of like that, except I think it's more, wow, if we're telling 5 people at an event 5 answers, what if we could just say this thing and then readers all over Australia could have the answers already? So it felt like a very economical way of sharing what actually shouldn't be secrets. This is just common sense, useful information that we've gleaned and understood over time as being something that is very good to share with new and emerging writers.
I think you've hit on a good point there. It shouldn't be secret. And there's a lot of what's in this book is almost considered secret in the industry because people on the outside don't know. They have got no idea of how to find that information. And especially, because when I, was able to organize this interview with you, it's like people on the outside don't realize how important it is to actually, and how rare it is to get time spent with the publisher one-on-one like this. And it's almost like having an audience with the Queen. So I'm very honored to do this.
Quite a busy Queen. And I think that's why it's actually hard to put those questions to publishers and to receive a response because they're getting on with their job of working with authors in particular books. So if you're outside that process, gaining an entree is actually quite difficult, as in just if you want to know something, how do you go about finding out?
Exactly. And I like the idea of just making it public, pulling the veil off all this mystery of the publishing industry and going, okay, this is what you need to know. And I like the fact that you've gone from the actual the early stages are when you're having inspiration to write, working at the focus, looking at the research that you have to do while you're actually looking to pitch, and going all the way through to actually creating the author platform and stuff like that. Now, I want to ask you, just let's jump straight into it. What are some of the biggest pitching mistakes that people make when they pitch to a publisher? What's the one of the most obvious one that they make?
It's often with pitching, it's actually often about audience. So have you paid heed to who your audience is? So have you chosen the right publisher in the first place to be telling them about your book? And authors are very good storytellers. So there's no reason that an author can't pitch and with practice can't pitch well. But you can imagine there's not just a single pitch for a book, and that is really determined by who you're talking to. So, and the other thing is to understand the context of what you've written. What is my genre? Where would it fit on the shelves? What sort of hooks does it have? What stories about me do I have that go with this book that I need to pitch as well? So there's quite a lot to think about. And also, do I need to do a written pitch, a 30-second pitch, a 5-minute pitch? You can imagine that, you know, there's a whole range of responses that you could build around the same material, depending on its destination.
I know it's hard for a writer to sit within themselves, to look outward, look in, and to go, okay, what's my story? What's my background? What value add can I write? Can I put to this pitch? Is there a tip that you can give authors of how to do that? How to step outside themselves to write in third person for their author bio and stuff like that?
I think show it to someone else who you think is canny. So,
but not your mum?
Well, if your mum is canny, go for it. But often it won't be your mum, but someone else who has an understanding of book and its context. So, and I think one of the really nice things about writing communities is there is a sense of passing on information and sharing and bringing other people up. So there are mentors around if you're part of a writing group who has slightly more experience than you, who you can show that to, who's been where you've already been. So that you're test driving whatever your written material happens to be on someone before you're sending it to a publisher. And if you're delivering it by, say, in a stand up and pitch kind of session, again, practice, but go through it with someone as well. And it needs to be interesting to them, and it be interesting to you in that sense. If you're talking about it, you need to bring the energy and vibrancy. So I suppose there are many different kinds of pitches actually, and I'm conflating a few responses there.
Yep. No, I know, because there are so many different angles you to take, but it's that initial separating yourself from your work. Because I know that for myself, you know, my publisher goes, okay, Josh, you've got to come up with your story, you've got to get your angle, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. And I'm going, I don't know, I'm just me. And so but it is that practice of stepping outside and going, okay, well, what is that unique thing about you or that story that is going to get a publisher really excited, that the publicist can go, right, this is the angle that I can run with the newspaper, with the magazines, with the radio interviews, that's going to get people really, really interested. And there was a good part in the book where you talk about that the media are going to be interested in the person behind the story. So they want to know you as the person, even if it's like a rural romance or whatever. Not that Fremantle Press does romance, but anyway, we'll just keep going with that. But it's that, what is your story that's going to be interesting? I think people find that quite hard to do, don't they?
Yeah. What are your hooks?
Yeah.
Effectively. And again, of course, that will be contextual, because if you are a rural romance writer, it will really depend who you're talking to as to what your hooks are. You know, are you a smart businesswoman who's on a really clever idea, or have you immersed yourself in, you know, I don't know, sort of the landscape around Geraldton or something, and therefore you really know what you're writing. I think the other thing to say is, don't panic about pitching. it's okay, because when you're actually approaching a publisher, the main thing the publisher is going to be looking at is the words on the page. So that's where their primary judgment, I'm speaking for myself here, but
Yep.
I think this is a reasonable generalization. The primary judgment is, what is this material? Can we work with it? Secondary thing is, who wrote it? Do they look like they've got more stories in them? That's really important.
Longevity,
And
yep.
do they know what they're about? Do they seem kind of switched on? You can then also, the marketing team can say, oh, fantastic, because X, Y, and Z, I really like what they represent in relation to this, and I can see how I can pitch it. But really, when you're being asked all those questions about, come on, Josh, get your angle, etc., etc., if the book that you've written and the story behind it isn't worth anything, then it's game over at that point.
Yeah.
So I think you do need, and I think the book makes this point, you do need to be two people, and one is the person sitting at their desk writing because they've got a story to tell and a message to share with an audience, and then there's the other part of yourself that's like, all right, how do we go about approaching publishers, etc., the more administrative, business-like self that can tend to that stuff. And those two are quite distinct.
Yeah, and I think that's a good definition, a good way of describing having the two aspects. Is there a writer that you worked with in the last few years that you could use as an example of, a great story, but also a great story of the person behind the book? Off the top of your head?
I would hope that was the case with every writer.
Just so
John Dowse.
Who?
Yeah, John Dowse is an interesting example.
Oh,
so
John, he's a funny character.
So he is, and he obviously has a public persona and a really energetic way of engaging with an audience, and that's part of his thing. He's an extrovert, so I should probably have given you an introverted example. But I think, sorry, the motorbikes of Quarry Street are a little.
I was going to say, that's a bit noisy where you are in Fremantle.
I think his capacity is not only to, and I worked with him over 10 years on a trilogy, so I'm really immersed in that process. But the difference between him and what he was trying to say versus what came out in the books, there is a difference between those things. And I guess now I've kind of lost the thread of your.
Is there someone who's a bit more of an introvert who came across, whose manuscript you came across your desk and you thought, wow, I really love this story. I really love what they've written about, and the story behind the person, that may have been a little bit maybe shy or a bit, how do I move this through, that sort of thing? Is there any?
Let's take Josephine Taylor.
Yep.
Especially on your podcast.
Yep.
Her historical fiction, Ivor Rook, beautifully written in and of itself. It's a great read. It's got this excellent twist about 3/4 of the way through where you go, whoa, okay.
Yep.
Next level.
I'm not going to say what it is.
Absolutely not. And then the person, Josephine, just upon talking to her, the revelations that she has and her own personal story about pain and its relationship to creativity, and her experience of having vulvodynia and how that's transformed her life. Those are two really separate things, and her life has fed into that book. But the story behind Josephine is also, from a marketing perspective, very, very marketable, and it's just having Josephine talking about the book is almost not the point when you have Josephine there in person, or when you're pitching Josephine to someone, because there is this whole other element. And she is a very contained and quite private seeming person in some ways, but what she gives and what she reveals is perfect in relation to the book that accompanies the author.
Yeah, okay, I agree. Yeah.
Back to John Doust, he's the extroverted version of that, but his own stories of his own personal battles and his pain and so forth, he offsets that with his comedic self in a way that, again, chimes with his book. You know, these authors are authentic in relation to their own work. You can see how they belong together, but they are bringing something else. And authenticity, I think, is key in this, so that if you're kind of making up something about yourself, there's no point. So you really are having to look at yourself and say, what is my story? How does it sit with this book? And how do I carry that forward as part of my book or my author brand?
Yep. And I think that developing the author brand is so important nowadays. Maybe go back 20, 30, 40 years ago, maybe not so, but I suppose with social media at the moment, and having I usually call it that the author partners with the publicist or with the publisher. It's not just you can just sit back now and live in a small hut in the bottom of Tasmania and pretend nothing's happening and just write away. You actually have to be at the coalface, really supporting and yourself and the publisher in what they're doing as well. What do you think? Is there still a perception from people that they don't have to do that? That you find that you get a manuscript come through and they've got no social media presence whatsoever?
Yeah. And you can see how that's authentic too. And and so if someone is ill at ease on social media, having them on social media is going to be counterproductive. So then it's for marketing to work with that person in a different way. You know, if they really are shy and retiring, are they very happy responding to written interviews? You know, that's answering questions on the page, etc. What are the comfort zones? So that the publicist and the marketing manager can train and draw out authors and develop strengths, but also need to work with strengths. So if you really aren't into social media, you can't and you shouldn't fake it.
Oh, that's really good advice. It's because sometimes they may feel pressured to start a Facebook page. I'm certainly guilty of that, of writers going, well, I'm writing a book. And I said, well, jump on, create a Facebook page, start documenting your journey. And they go, I don't know, I don't feel comfortable with that. And, you know, so you're saying that they may not have to. It really depends.
It's not for everyone. And also if you're a vigorous blogger, for example, then great, use that and go with it. If you're really pressed for time and you don't like sharing yourself in that way, then it's not going to be sustainable anyhow. So know yourself. Know where your audience is. You know, if it's very visual material, you might just be on Instagram. If they're young readers, you may not be on Facebook, etc. So someone said, fish where the fish are. So you also need to tailor your platform to who your audience is. But if you're ill at ease, that will also show. So yeah, authenticity is important. And it might be that you're just thinking instead about your look and your persona and your public appearances and your written appearances and so forth. And brand is not a sinister thing or an awful thing. It's just a way of thinking, how is my sort of professional administrative business self, how does that make its way through the world in a way that makes sense of what I've written? Yeah,
exactly. And I think you've hit on a point there. Actually, being a writer and creating that persona or trying to understand yourself or being a writer is a great way of actually understanding yourself, understanding what your message is, understanding what your morals, what your values are, and being confident to bring that out into the world. And I think that's a really interesting way of looking at it. I've just had that little inspiration there, Georgia. It's like what you do as an editor and all that. You're basically taking someone and nurturing them to find themselves and be brave enough to put themselves forward in a way. Am I right?
Yeah, you are. I think in the case of more reluctant or introverted authors, maybe the author is just following their story out into the world in a sense. They've got this thing they really want to say. Here's the book, out it comes. You've got to follow in its wake if you're going to be a success. And by a success, I mean if you're going to interact with an audience and sell books. If you're not, so be it. And the more an author does, the more successful they will be, and the more interested a publisher will be in continuing on to the next book. So that's entirely up to you as well. But you can think about your message first and why you wrote the book in the first place, and then tailor parts of yourself to that.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is it? Yeah, what is it that I want also about myself to go out into the world?
Social media etiquette. Have you come across things where you've got a manuscript or you're reading a thing and you check out someone's social media and you go, warning bells go up?
I can't specifically think of an example, but we do.
I wanted something juicy, George. I want a juicy boss.
I should just lie.
Make it up.
There is a section of the book called "Cleaning the Mud Off Your Digital Footprint," and
Yes.
I think it's more if you don't want to look like a sort of a hapless party hound when you're presenting.
Just having a good time. That's it. Their persona.
It does, and it doesn't matter, and you can have an author page instead. But I think it's important for writers who are submitting to publishers to know that publishers may go looking at their social media and may make a decision. If it's touch and go, or if there are a number of books they're weighing up, they could make a decision based on what they see. But I think, I don't know, those things seem to match up pretty well as well. So if your book is an exuberant rollick, then you'd expect to go to the social media page and see that mirrored in another way, wouldn't you?
Yes, you would. And then, because then you wouldn't get that dissonance, that thing of going, is that the same person that wrote that? You know, that sort of thing. Yeah.
So, I mean, Helen Demidenko / Darvel is someone who, that would have been very interesting at the time of her submitting the hand that signed the paper to the Miles Franklin.
That's a long time ago, isn't it?
Sure is. But yes, pre-social media. But it's easier, I think, to pull off an identity heist pre-social media than it is now, because you've got so many parts of your life that are on display that you need to think about. So I guess the point just is conduct yourself on social media as if you're going to be seen, because you will be seen. And if being a published author is important to you, then you need to think about your social media in relation to that profile.
Okay, that's pretty straightforward, simple advice. I need to adhere to that, especially sometimes if social media is awkward for you. Like for me, Twitter, I cannot get Twitter. I keep feeling I should be on it and doing it, and I post something and it's the most silliest, awkwardest thing, and then I go, oh, what did I do that for?
Yeah, and see if it doesn't feel right, don't do it.
I know. But it's one of these things that I think you talk about in the book as well, is that you feel this pressure to be everywhere, to be really pushing things and stuff like that, when what you're trying to say is the authenticity is the most important thing, and that has to come through.
That's right. And the writing itself is the most important thing. So our most enduring authors are the ones who continually have something urgent that they want to share with an audience, and it's ultimately about the book. I mean, we are talking about books here,
yes,
aren't we? So,
which can get lost with all the other bits around it, but you're right. Yeah,
that's right. Ultimately, that's the thing that's in someone's lounge room, and they can also follow you on Instagram and Facebook or Twitter, and feel connected to you in that way. And that's a great way of connecting to an audience. But ultimately, they're drawn to you because they're connected to something in.
Georgia, if there was one secret golden tip that you could give to Sally or Barry or Cheryl, who's sitting at home watching this, going, I've got my manuscript ready to go. I think it's ready. What's one thing that you could tell them?
I think to understand that it's a long game. That's my one thing.
Yep. Okay.
May I now develop that? So
Flesh it out.
Or you could say perseverance is key. So to really separate your writing self from your business self, to understand that rejection is a thing, that numerically you're much more likely to be rejected than you are accepted, that your first manuscript is probably not going to be as good as your fifth manuscript. So just because you've written a book doesn't mean this is the book. So to understand, I guess, why you're in it in the first place. And if you're in it because you love writing, you have a story that you want to share with an audience, then that's the thing that you need to keep pushing forward and working for, using all the other sort of administrative tools at your disposal.
I like that. It's almost like if you've got something to say, that's going to be the thing that drives you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's right.
And everything else will be supporting that.
That's right. And so rather, I wanted to be a writer when I grew up back in the day. And there was a time when I was full of, all the podium speeches I would make when I won the Vogels or whatever. And none of that came to pass. But it was also beginning to understand that actually it's not the podium speeches that count. It's what happens every day when you turn up at your desk and putting words on the page. That's what counts.
Yeah, and that's what I think fills up a lot of people, to know that they've actually achieved something, they've written something, and obviously the next step is getting it published. I had a really great question to ask you, but it's just suddenly slipped my mind. It'll pop back any moment. It's just like life, really. It's one of the things that you talk about in the book. I think actually Deb Fitzpatrick mentions it. I call it post-publication blues. It's where your books just come out, you've got all the media attention, you're doing interviews, all your likes go through the roof on social media, and you're pumping out content left, right, and center, and you do get addicted to the attention. I know every time I have a book out, it's sort of like, yes, yeah. I love the attention. The focus is on me. I get to talk about it. I get to share my story, and I feel good, and I feel everyone loves me. And then things just slowly die off. I had one of the nonfiction books that I wrote about 6 years ago called Dying to Know. That was such a whirlwind of publicity. And then within about 4 months, everything died off, and it was like, well, back to reality again. And I'm, checking emails. Come on, any more emails coming through? And it's like, Deb Fitzpatrick says the same thing. You get this addicted, like, any more emails? Come on. And it's something that no one ever really talks about, is the post-publication blues. Do you find that most authors get that?
I think it's always, so I suppose it's what you're actually mourning is the serotonin hits have gone from that.
Well, that's basically it. Okay, it's a drug high, a natural one.
Yeah, that's right. But there is another kind of blues, which I think is when you promote, and then you start to feel like you're being kept from your work.
Yes.
And
yes.
Actually, if you've got the deep and abiding satisfaction of writing, that is always the thing you can go back to. And if you're being kept from that, then you can start to panic about that. So it's always balancing up those two things of, I spent, several years writing this book. Here it is out in the world. Whoa, 3 months has gone, and out of the whirlwind and back to the crickets. And that's the nature of the life of many books, not all books. But I think we also in the book talk about understanding what success means to you. And, some authors say, if I could just have one stranger in a library read my book and it make a difference, then that is enough for me. So sort of understanding what is enough for you and monitoring your own satisfaction in relation to that, and what are you actually striving for, and what is important about reaching an audience and publishing, which is really, really different to what is satisfying about writing a book in the first place. So you've always got this tension within you of the private writing self and the public self.
I totally agree with that. Only this morning, because I've been so fixated on the publicity and all the promotion coming out with my new book, that the publisher asked me today, what's the new one you're working on? And I got excited and I was able to talk about this concept for this new kids book that I'm doing. And I suddenly got that inner joy back again of going,
yeah,
it's because this is where it comes from and this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
And I want to bring it out. And that's that moment. But as you said, there's that constant tension between that time and that feeling, because that's the intrinsic value, the inside feeling, as opposed to the outside validation of likes, adulation, more interviews and all that sort of stuff. And it is balancing that. And I think people have to find it on their own terms when they get into this. And as you said in the beginning, it's like, it is a long-term thing. You want to be able to look at a manuscript, look at the author and go, okay, what else have they got? Can this be a long-term proposition? And I think a lot of authors, sometimes they don't realize that. They may have just that one manuscript, maybe it's a memoir or something like that. And it's like, okay, well, how can you flesh? And maybe people don't realize they've actually got more stuff in them. I didn't realize I had it either. I have my one claim to fame, Georgia, is that I keep letting people know that I was rejected by Fremantle Press 10 years ago with my first book. And I use that as a great indication. And because I remember I got a bottle of cheap bubbles to celebrate it with, to go, I was brave enough to submit, to put it out there, to get rejected. And I know that so many people have that manuscript in the fourth drawer down or on the hard drive of their computer that they're too scared to put out there. And I think it's an amazing, courageous thing for people to do that, is to actually put themselves forward. And that's what I was celebrating with my rejection from Fremantle Press and my bottle of champagne.
And so the question for you is, so after that rejection, what happened next? I
kept submitting and I kept going.
Yeah.
And then I got picked up by the fourth publisher and that I submitted to. And it was like, and it's the important thing is, I suppose one of the things is I didn't take it too seriously. And because I had never anticipated on being an author or anything like that. It wasn't on my radar. So I didn't wrap too much expectation around it. And I know that can be a lot of things for a lot of people. They wrap up so much expectation, which is what I do now, unfortunately, because I'm in the field now. I go, well, I want to have this book published. I want to be doing this. I want to do that. So I put expectation on it, which can actually weigh it down a little bit.
And again, there's the tension between creativity and expectation, experience, what you want from the world, etc. They are still two different things. And I think reminding yourself from time to time of why are you even writing another book? There is a reason you keep going back to write the book.
Yes.
In the same way that there's a reason that you keep trying to be published, but they are different impulses and they answer different needs, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right, actually. And I think when people, look, having this conversation, it really makes people sit down who want to write or who are writing or want to be an author to really look inside themselves. It's an opportunity to really look about what your motivations are, why you were doing it. And for you on the other receiving end of that, you can pick that up straight away, can't you?
Pick up what straight away?
You can pick up what their motivations are, where they're coming from.
Yeah, look, I think you can feel that essential energy or drive in a manuscript. So the other reason that we included the words of 18 different authors within the book, this is partly because when I was growing up and wanting to be a writer, I really loved Candida Baker's Yakka series, where she interviews a whole range of writers about their process, Australian writers, and I just loved having an insight into their worlds. And that was aspirational for me. These were role models, something to reach for. And what we wanted to show when we asked for author contributions, got them to answer the questions that writers have, was that these were all writers who also started off wanting to be writers. And now they are published authors. So they are just further down the track of where writers starting out are, and you can look forward and say, oh, there's Dave Wish-Wilson in the middle distance. There's Caitlin Mailing off writing her poetry.
Yeah. There's James
Rachel Bosley
Foley in his
writing her
back room
real
now
romance.
making a living out of this and all that. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. But there they are, and they have reflections that are really worth hearing, and they also have all quite different perspectives from each other. And we wanted those different perspectives to be present too, and say that there's more than one way of going about this.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what is good about this book, because you can, no matter where you are at in your writing or publishing journey, you can see from someone else's perspective, and especially with all the other contributing writers you've got in here, they're all so honest, and that's what I appreciate. Like, I can't remember what the question was like, what's it like to be, can you make a full-time living out of writing? And some of them go, no, you're still got to have a day job, still got to do this, and you go, oh,
yeah,
but it demystifies it, which is great, which makes it go, you as the writer sitting at home going, maybe this is doable. Maybe I can do this. Maybe I can have a good crack at being that writer who I want to be.
Or conversely, you know what? I'm happy just sitting at home writing, and I don't want to put myself through all of that. And that's okay too. And at different times in your life, you might be a different kind of writer. And your priorities change, and you may really be pursuing it, and then you need to set it aside because life intervenes, or because your own mode changes, and so at different times, you have a different relationship to your writing self, I think, too.
I like, and the fact that it's the two people, it's the two identities, it's taking it as the business and taking it as you the writer. And I think the business aspect is sometimes either downplayed or that's the mystery part. That's the part they don't really talk about. And you're sitting at home going, I have got invoices I've got to write for school talks. I've got to organise my schedule for the next month I've got a writers' festival to go to. I've got to do so many school visits. I've got to do, how do I get organised? What am I doing? And then, I had a moment last year where I'm thinking, I really want to be a full-time writer. I want to be doing all the writerly things. And I was looking at my desk, and I went, okay, well, I've got a grant application for a new book over there. I've got a manuscript I'm about to start working on, and I've got a contract to sign over there. And I went, Josh, you're a dickhead. You're actually doing it. You're actually living this life. Yeah. And look, we're not even going to talk about the money aspect here, Georgia, because that's another episode altogether. And we won't talk about that, because I think it's easy to say, what do you want to get out of the writing, out of being an author? And certainly if you want to be rich and famous, only a small number of people are actually going to do that and get to there. And that's been honestly true. But can you make a living out of it? Yes, you can.
You can make a living out of your abilities at storytelling, at being well-versed in language, at being a good listener, at being empathetic and curious and interactive with the world. So you really have skills that are quite a rare commodity, I think. And harking back to something you just said before, Deb Fitzpatrick is someone who I've actually known for a very long time because we're at university together. And occasionally we have the chance to say, wouldn't our 20-year-old selves be pleased if they could know that this had happened? And so you can actually, you yourself can think back to Josh Langley, however many years ago, and say, hey, look, if you could see my desk now, how impressed would you be? And to actually pause and say, well, I am doing it. Yeah. And maybe it'll never feel like I've made it, but actually I have made it, and I am living my dream.
And that's the thing, is to appreciate that, is to be in that and have that moment of appreciation and that gratitude. And as you actually never make it, because as you know, it's an evolving process and everything changes. But to be in that process of, I'm so grateful to be able to do what I'm doing when so many people can't, or whatever. And that's the offering, the helping, the assistance. And that's why I wanted to talk to you to get your insights. And this book is such a great asset to have out there. I'm going to ask you one last question, Georgia. What
Make it a
lights-
good one.
I'm scared. What lights you up?
What lights me up?
What makes your heart
I
sing?
I totally love going through the submissions and opening a book, reading it, think we're underway. Here we go. You know, buckle up. This is I'm in good hands. I just take me where you want to go. And that is the pleasure of a reader, you know, that is, and so I'm connecting to something, and I'm really excited to see what this writer is delivering. And, you know, all the extra submission material is the extraneous stuff is irrelevant when compared to that moment of, oh, here we go. You know, this is it. And that's always a very definite, affirming, positive feeling of, yep, this is one of them right there.
Wow. I used to work in radio, and I used to speak to a lot of music directors, and they would have, you know, mountains of music to listen to, and to go here, all the new hits will come out and the new releases, and they would hear one song and they go, this is that song, and they would get that same feeling of, yes, yay. And then they will put it on the playlist, and bang, it'll be a hit. But it's that moment when you realize something big here is big here.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah.
Georgia, thank you so much for writing this with Deborah Hunn. This is fantastic. Now, out through Fremantle Press, in all good bookshops at the moment?
Absolutely. And the other thing that I would add is that also there is a How to Be an Author in Australia Facebook page,
Yes.
so that writers can join that, and they can get on there and they can ask questions of publishers, of other established writers and other emerging writers about any of this material and anything in their own lives. And that's a really nice little adjunct platform to what we've done here. And it's just keeping the conversation dynamic and going. So those two things together, as well as hopping into a bookshop and grabbing one, is all a writer needs, really, isn't it, Josh?
It's everything a writer needs. Plus, the Facebook group is great because you're rotating through the what's the word?
The contributors.
Contributors, yes. So
Yep.
I think you've done a stint, and you're going through other people, so you can ask specific questions of, like, from publicity to editing to all that sort of stuff. Okay,
That's right.
and I'll put the link down here in the show notes and all that sort of stuff. Look, Georgia, it has been absolutely wonderful. Thank you for your time and giving us such an insight into your role and into what it's like to get published and stuff like that.
My pleasure, Josh. Thanks for talking to me.
No problem.
What are we gonna